When all hope faded, humans descended from the heavens. The ground trembled beneath Maya Chen's feet as another barrage of plasma fire scorched the air above the makeshift shelter. Screams echoed through the underground caverns of Kepler 442b, mixing with the distant roar of Zephyrian war machines grinding through the colony's outer defenses. Dust cascaded from the rocky ceiling, and somewhere in the darkness, a child's voice called out for a parent who would never answer. Maya pressed her palm against the flickering comm terminal, its screen dancing with static and interference. Her fingers, stained with grease and blood from 3 days of constant repairs, hovered over the emergency beacon controls. The signal was weak, barely a whisper against the electromagnetic storm raging above, but it was all they had left. "Mayday, mayday," she whispered into the microphone, her voice hoarse from smoke and exhaustion. "This is New Terra Colony, Kepler 442b. We are under siege, civilian population, scattered, military forces, overrun." The words felt like lead in her throat. "If anyone receives this transmission, we need immediate assistance. We cannot hold much longer." Static answered her, always static. Behind her, the survivors huddled in the expanded mine shaft that had become their final refuge. 43 souls, farmers, engineers, teachers, children, all that remained of a colony that had once housed nearly 8,000. Their faces were hollow masks of soot and despair, eyes that had seen too much death in too few days. Dr. Elena Vasquez knelt beside a wounded miner, her medical supplies nearly exhausted. She looked up at Maya with tired eyes that reflected the same question everyone was thinking, but afraid to voice. How much longer? Maya turned back to the console and tried again. The coalition frequency was dead, the merchant channels silent. Even the pirate networks had gone dark. It was as if the entire sector had simply abandoned them to their fate. "Nothing?" asked Commander Jake Morrison, limping over on a leg wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. The colony's security chief had fought a running battle for 72 hours straight, falling back from position to position as the Zephyrian assault forces systematically dismantled their defenses. Maya shook her head. "Same as before. Either no one's listening or no one cares." Morrison's jaw tightened. Outside, the sound of approaching machinery grew louder. The distinctive whine of Zephyrian hover tanks, their energy weapons charging for another bombardment. The commander checked his rifle, knowing it held only 3 rounds. Around the cavern, the other armed survivors did the same. 17 weapons between them, maybe 50 shots total. Against an army. "Maya," Morrison said quietly, "if you can jury-rig that transmitter to overload the power cells." She knew what he was suggesting, a final act of defiance that would take the tunnel and everyone in it, rather than let them fall into Zephyrian hands. She'd seen what the aliens did to prisoners. Death was preferable. Her hand moved toward the power coupling, then stopped. Something had changed in the static, a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat buried in the interference. "Wait," she breathed, adjusting the frequency modulation. The pattern grew stronger, more distinct. Not random noise, a signal, coded, military-grade encryption that her modified civilian equipment could barely decode. The transmission came through in fragments. "This is UTDF Sovereign, receiving distress. Stand by for..." More static, then ETA 40 minutes. Hold position. Extraction authorized. Maya's hands shook as she fine-tuned the receiver. UTDF, United Terran Defense Force. But that was impossible. Earth was 67 light-years away, and the UTDF hadn't operated this far into the outer rim for decades. "Did you get that?" Morrison asked, leaning over her shoulder. Before Maya could answer, the cavern shook with another impact. Closer this time. Through the concealed entrance, they could see the eerie blue glow of Zephyrian searchlights sweeping across the rocky landscape. "Attention humans," a synthesized voice echoed across the valley, transmitted through speakers mounted on the alien war machines. The words were perfect English, but spoken with the cold precision of a species that had never known emotion. "Your resistance is noted and cataloged. Surrender now, and you will be processed according to hegemony protocols. Continue to resist, and you will be categorized as hostile combatants. This offer will not be repeated. Processing. Maya knew what that meant. Neural extraction, genetic sampling, then disposal. The Zephyrian hegemony had been strip mining worlds for resources and intelligence for 3 centuries. Humans were just another resource to be cataloged and consumed. She keyed the transmitter one more time, broadcasting on the frequency the mysterious signal had used. Unknown UTDF vessel, this is New Terra Colony. We copy your transmission. Be advised we are under immediate threat. Zephyrian forces are moving on our position. We have civilians, including children. Whatever you're planning, please hurry. The response came back immediately, clear and strong. Copy that, New Terra. This is Captain Sarah Kane, commanding UTDF Sovereign. We have your position locked. Stay underground and keep your heads down. The cavalry is coming. In the command bridge of the UTDF Sovereign, Captain Sarah Kane stood before the tactical display, her weathered face illuminated by the red glow of combat lighting. The ship around her hummed with barely contained energy, a dreadnought-class vessel that had been retrofitted with every piece of experimental technology the UTDF could salvage from black-budget programs. "Status report," she commanded, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the bridge. 37 minutes to orbital insertion, reported Lieutenant Commander Marcus Torres from the navigation station. We're running dark, full sensor dampening and electromagnetic masking. The Zephyrian fleet won't detect us until we're right on top of them. Kane nodded. The Sovereign was one of only 12 ships of her class, each one a testament to human engineering and desperation. When the Zephyrian hegemony had begun their systematic expansion into human space, Earth's response had been swift and uncompromising. If humanity was going to die, they would not go quietly. Weapon status? All systems green, answered Major Patricia Reed from the tactical station. A career Marine who had transitioned to shipboard combat, Reed carried herself with the coiled tension of someone who had seen too many battles. Kinetic batteries loaded with tungsten penetrators, plasma torpedo tubes armed and ready, point defense systems online. Kane studied the tactical display showing Kepler 442b and the surrounding space. 3 Zephyrian cruisers held orbital position, their sleek forms bristling with energy weapons. On the planet's surface, heat signatures indicated a full regiment of ground forces, hover tanks, walker units, and atmospheric fighters. A standard occupation force designed to overwhelm and pacify. They had no idea what was coming. "Launch bay, report. Drop pods loaded and ready," came the voice of Sergeant Major Frank Collins over the comm. "Razor Company is locked and loaded. 48 Marines ready for immediate deployment." Kane allowed herself a thin smile. Razor Company, the UTDF's most elite ground unit, composed entirely of volunteers who had lost everything to the Zephyrian advance. They fought not for glory or politics, but for revenge. Pure, focused, lethal revenge. "Ma'am," Torres called out, "we're picking up increased activity from the surface. The Zephyrians are moving on the civilian position." Kane's expression hardened. "Accelerate to emergency insertion velocity. I don't care if they detect us now. Those people don't have time for stealth." The Sovereign's engines roared to life, pushing the massive ship through space at a speed that would have been impossible without the experimental fusion drives. G-forces pressed against the crew despite the inertial dampeners, but no one complained. They had a job to do. On the planet below, the Zephyrian ground commander, designated Unit Prime 7, surveyed the tactical display with satisfaction. The human colony had been reduced to a single pocket of resistance, cornered in underground excavations with nowhere to run. The end phase of the operation would be completed within the hour. "Deploy seismic charges at grid coordinates 773 through 779, it commanded, its voice a flat electronic tone. "Collapse the tunnel system. Recovery teams will process any survivors." The hover tanks moved into position, their heavy chassis scarring the rocky ground. Zephyrian soldiers, tall, thin beings encased in powered armor that enhanced their already considerable strength, checked their energy weapons and prepared for the final assault. Or, Unit Prime 7 felt something that might have been satisfaction, if its species had been capable of such emotions. Another world pacified, another species cataloged, the hegemony's expansion would continue unabated. High above, unseen and undetected, the UTDF sovereign broke through the outer atmosphere like a falling star. But instead of burning up in the planet's atmosphere, it shed its heat in controlled bursts, using experimental cooling systems to maintain stealth until the final moment. In the colony's underground shelter, Maya Chen watched the seismic scanner with growing horror. "They're setting charges," she announced, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're going to collapse the tunnels." Commander Morrison checked his rifle one last time. "Everyone who can fight, take position at the entrance. Everyone else, get to the deepest part of the cavern." The survivors moved with quiet desperation. Parents clutched their children. The wounded prepared to make their final stand from stretchers. Dr. Vasquez distributed the last of her pain medication to those who needed it most. Maya remained at the comm station, still broadcasting on the frequency the UTDF ship had used. "Sovereign, if you're still out there, they're about to collapse our position. We need help now." The response came back immediately. "Copy that, New Terra. Look up." Confused, Maya glanced toward the cavern entrance. Through the concealed opening, she could see the night sky, and something that made her heart skip a beat. A star was falling. No, not falling, descending with purpose and terrible intent. The Sovereign dropped out of stealth mode like a predator emerging from shadows. Every sensor on the planet suddenly blazed with warnings as the massive human dreadnought revealed itself, its hull gleaming with weapons arrays and armor plating that had been forged in Earth's orbital shipyards. Unit Prime 7's reaction was immediate. "All units, priority alert. Unknown vessel approaching. Classification. Analyzing. Vessel type unknown. Configuration unknown. Technology level uncertain." The Zephyrian commander had never encountered anything like the Sovereign. The hegemony's intelligence on human military capabilities was decades out of date, based on encounters with civilian vessels and lightly armed patrol craft. They had no data on what humanity could build when pushed to the edge of extinction. Captain Kane's voice echoed across all frequencies, broadcasting in the clear for everyone to hear. "Attention, Zephyrian forces. This is Captain Sarah Kane of the United Terran Defense Force. You are in violation of the Kepler Accords and are engaged in illegal military action against civilian populations. You have 30 seconds to begin immediate withdrawal from the system." Unit Prime 7 processed this transmission with something approaching disbelief. A single human vessel challenging an entire occupation force? The concept was beyond its comprehension. Response: "Your threat is cataloged and dismissed. This world is now under hegemony jurisdiction. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Kane's reply was immediate and cold. "Understood. Have it your way." The space battle that followed lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. The Sovereign opened fire with everything it had: kinetic batteries that hurled tungsten penetrators at relativistic speeds, plasma torpedoes that could melt through meters of armor plating, and particle beam weapons that struck with the force of miniature stars. The ship moved with a grace that belied its massive size, rolling and diving through three-dimensional space, while its weapons spoke with voices of thunder. The first Zephyrian cruiser died before it could return fire, its hull ruptured by a kinetic strike that tore through its reactor core. The explosion lit up the planet's night side like a second sun. The second cruiser managed to fire one volley before 3 plasma torpedoes found their mark. Its death was slower, more spectacular, a rolling cascade of secondary explosions that sent debris raining down through the atmosphere. The third cruiser tried to run. It almost made it to the edge of the gravity well before the Sovereign's particle beams caught it, slicing through its engines like a knife through paper. It went dark and began to drift, powerless and defeated. On the planet's surface, the Zephyrian ground forces watched their orbital support vanish in minutes. Unit Prime 7 attempted to process this new information, but its tactical programming had no response for such a complete reversal of fortune. That was when the drop pods began to fall. 48 ceramic and titanium capsules plunged through the atmosphere, their heat shields glowing white-hot as they shed velocity. Each pod contained a single Marine from Razor Company, along with enough weapons and ammunition to outfit a small army. The pods impacted across the battlefield like missiles, each one carefully targeted to maximize tactical advantage. As the hatches blew open, the Marines emerged into hell and began to make it their own. Sergeant Major Frank Collins was the first boots on the ground, his pods slamming into the earth just 50 meters from a Zephyrian hover tank. He rolled out with his assault rifle already firing, the hypervelocity rounds punching through alien armor with surgical precision. The tank's crew never knew what hit them. "Razor Company, sound off," he barked into his comm. "Razor 2, in position. Razor 7, engaging hostiles. Razor 12, tank down." The responses came rapid fire as 47 other Marines established their positions and began the methodical destruction of the Zephyrian ground force. They moved with the coordination of a pack of wolves, each Marine supporting the others in an intricate dance of violence and precision. Corporal Lisa Zhang found herself face-to-face with 3 Zephyrian soldiers in powered armor. Her first burst took down the leader, explosive rounds detonating inside its chest cavity. The second warrior raised its energy weapon, but Zhang was already moving, diving behind a boulder as coherent light scorched the air where she had been standing. She came up firing, her rifle set to full automatic. The Zephyrian's armor was tough, but human ammunition had been designed specifically to counter it. Depleted uranium cores wrapped in explosive shells, fired at speeds that created their own plasma upon impact. The alien went down hard. The third warrior was smarter, using cover and attempting to flank her position, but it had made the mistake of thinking like a Zephyrian, logical, predictable, methodical. Zhang thought like a human, creative, adaptable, and absolutely ruthless when cornered. She pulled the pin on a thermite grenade and rolled it across the ground, not at the alien's position, but at the rocky outcropping above it. The explosion brought down half a ton of stone, crushing the Zephyrian beneath an avalanche of debris. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as Razor Company systematically dismantled the occupation force. The Zephyrians were individually stronger, better armored, and equipped with superior energy weapons, but they had never faced humans who fought with the desperation of a species that had nothing left to lose. Private Marcus Webb found himself pinned down by a Zephyrian walker, a 12-foot-tall mechanical nightmare bristling with weapons. Its pilot was methodically destroying his cover with sustained particle beam fire, and Webb knew he had maybe 10 seconds before the rock formation disintegrated completely. He keyed his comm. "Anyone got eyes on that walker at grid 447? I'm about to become paste over here. I got you, Webb." The voice belonged to Staff Sergeant Monica Reyes, calling in from a ridge 300 meters away. "Keep its attention for 5 more seconds." Webb popped up and fired a burst at the walker's sensor array, the rounds sparking harmlessly off its armor, but accomplishing their purpose. The machine turned toward him, raising its main gun. Reyes had been carrying a prototype weapon, a man-portable railgun that could accelerate a tungsten spike to 6 kilometers per second. She'd been saving it for exactly this kind of situation. The spike hit the walker's center mass, punching through its armor like tissue paper and continuing through the pilot's compartment before exiting the far side in a spray of metal and circuitry. The machine toppled backward, crushing 2 Zephyrian soldiers who had been using it for cover. "Walker down," Reyes reported. "Webb, you still breathing?" "Affirmative. Thanks for the save." Within 20 minutes of the drop, the tide of battle had completely reversed. The Zephyrian ground force, which had been methodically preparing to eliminate the last pocket of human resistance, found itself surrounded and outgunned by an enemy they had never imagined possible. Unit Prime 7 attempted to coordinate a fighting withdrawal, but its communications were being jammed by sophisticated electronic warfare systems. Its soldiers, trained for pacification operations against lightly armed civilians, were dying by the dozens against opponents who had spent years preparing for exactly this kind of fight. The Zephyrian commander made its final report to the hegemony as plasma fire began to close in on its position. "Unit Prime 7 reporting, human military capabilities significantly underestimated. Request immediate reinforcement. Repeat. Request immediate. Sergeant Major Collins put 3 rounds through the alien's command console, ending the transmission permanently. In the underground shelter, Maya Chen and the other survivors listened to the sound of battle raging above. But something had changed. The systematic bombardment had stopped. The grinding of Zephyrian war machines had been replaced by the sharp crack of human weapons and the occasional explosion of alien equipment. "What's happening up there?" asked Dr. Vasquez, cradling a wounded child in her arms. Maya was still monitoring the comm channels, her hands flying over the controls as she tried to make sense of the chatter. I think someone's winning, and it's not the Zephyrians." Commander Morrison, despite his wounds, had managed to make his way to the cavern entrance. He peered through this concealed opening, his eyes widening at what he saw. Human soldiers, real ones, in powered armor, marked with the insignia of the United Terran Defense Force, were advancing across the battlefield. They moved with professional efficiency, clearing Zephyrian positions with coordinated fire and movement techniques that Morrison recognized from his own military training decades ago. But these weren't the soldiers he remembered from peacetime Earth. These were harder, more experienced, carrying weapons he'd never seen before. They fought with the controlled fury of people who had learned to hate their enemy with scientific precision. "Maya," he called out, his voice filled with wonder. "You need to see this." The survivors gathered at the entrance, watching as the last organized Zephyrian resistance crumbled. A human Marine, his armor scarred and blackened but intact, approached their position with his rifle lowered. "United Terran Defense Force," he announced, his voice carrying through his helmet speakers. "Are there civilians in there?" Maya found her voice first. "Yes, 43 survivors. We have wounded." "Copy that. I'm Corporal Zhang, Razor Company. You're safe now. We're going to get you out of there." As the Marines worked to clear the entrance and evacuate the survivors, Maya couldn't stop staring at the transformed battlefield. Where hours before there had been the overwhelming presence of alien occupation forces, now there were only smoking wrecks and the methodical movement of human soldiers securing the area. "How?" she asked Zhang, as the corporal helped her out of the tunnel. "How did you know to come here? How did you get here so fast?" Zhang's helmet retracted, revealing the face of a young woman with old eyes, someone who had seen too much war for her age. "We've been hunting these bastards across 3 sectors, she explained. "When we picked up your distress signal, the captain didn't hesitate. We dropped everything and came running. But Earth is 67 light years away." "We're not from Earth anymore," Zhang said quietly. "Haven't been for a long time. The UTDF operates from mobile bases now. Ships like the Sovereign that go where they're needed most." She looked up at the night sky where the massive dreadnought hung in orbit like a protective angel. "We go where people need help, and we make sure the Zephyrians remember why messing with humans is a bad idea." As the survivors were loaded onto evacuation shuttles, Captain Kane's voice echoed across the comm channels. "Attention all personnel. This is the captain. Mission accomplished. All civilian survivors recovered. Zephyrian occupation force neutralized. Well done, people." But even as the shuttles lifted off toward the Sovereign, Kane was already studying the star charts, looking for the next system under threat, the next cry for help that would bring the UTDF running through the darkness between stars. In the depths of space, the message was already spreading. The Zephyrian hegemony's expansion had met something it had never encountered before. Humans who refused to be victims, who had learned to fight with the desperation of a species that had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The galaxy was about to learn that when all hope faded, when darkness seemed absolute, humanity had a way of appearing from the void like avenging angels. They came not as conquerors or saviors, but as something far more dangerous, as people who had decided that some things were worth fighting for, no matter the odds. The war was far from over, but for the first time in years, the Zephyrian hegemony had reason to fear the dark between stars. Because somewhere in that darkness, human ships were moving, and they were coming for anyone who threatened the innocent. When all hope faded, humans descended from the heavens, and they brought with them the promise that no one would face extinction alone. The universe was about to learn what humanity looked like when it stopped playing defense and started taking the fight to its enemies. It was a lesson the Zephyrian hegemony would not soon forget, assuming any of them survived to remember it. The end.